All right, for this lesson, we're going to continue on talking about how to identify the slope and the y-intercept from equations. So we have two forms of a linear equation. So remember, we're talking about linear functions. So these are linear functions, and these are two formats that you are going to be able to see these functions in. Now, one of them you should already recognize, and that is y equals mx plus b. So we have y equals mx plus b. Now, in the previous videos, we've talked about the slope and we've talked about the y-intercept. So in my particular example here, I have that my slope is my m value. So m represents my slope. That represents my rate of change, my rise over my run, what I'm changing about every time. All right, then we have the b value, and the b value is going to represent the y-intercept. So b represents the y-intercept. Now remember, the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. Okay, so that is a point where it crosses the y-axis. So if it's in what we call slope-intercept form, it's called slope-intercept form for a reason, because it gives us the slope and it gives us the y-intercept. So slope-intercept form tells me what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. Now, the other form that you're going to see is called standard form. So standard form is ax plus by equals c. A, b, and c are numbers. So a, b, and c are just numbers. So an example of that would be 2x plus 4y equals 9. All right, and you can see that in this example, the a is my 2, the b is my 4, and the c is my 8. Okay, so x and y are still the variables, but it is rearranged. Now, we typically do not use standard form very often. What you're going to do is you are actually going to solve for y. And in solving for y, you're going to go from standard form, and when you solve for y, you're going to go to slope-intercept form. So we are going to practice today how to solve for y, because you can't tell me the slope and the y-intercept. So the most common thing that students get confused about is the question will be, what's the y-intercept? And for some reason, students want to say the b is the y-intercept because it's with the y variable. That is completely incorrect. The y-intercept is the b value, the value that is by itself. Now, this is not the same b here as here. Just like the m is not the a, okay? So you have to solve for y in order to tell me what my slope and my y-intercept is. All right, so let's start with some basics, and these are all in slope-intercept form. All right, so again, these are all in slope-intercept form. These are y equals mx plus b. All right, so we have y equals mx plus b. So what I want you to do is we are going to practice actually identifying what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. All right, so we're going to start with the slope and the y-intercept. All right, so looking at this example, I can see that this is in slope-intercept form. So my slope is -4. My y-intercept is -1. And it's that simple. Now, for this next example, for number 2, I have y equals -x. So there has to be a number there. In this particular spot, there has to be a number in front. So for any variable, there's an automatic understood 1. So my slope is -1, and my y-intercept is going to be 3. All right, number 3, I have y equals -5 over 2x minus 5. So my slope is going to be -5 over 2, and my y-intercept is going to be -5. You need to make sure you include the negative, the subtraction sign with that value. Now, for the next two, we have a horizontal and vertical line. So how do I know the difference? Well, x equals 5, that means it's going to cross the x-axis. That is a Vux problem. So it has x in it, so x equals is a Vux problem. If it's y equals, then it's a Hoy problem because it has the y equals and the y value. So what does that mean? So when I think about a vertical line, how do I know I'm doing vertical? Because that's what V stands for. So for my vertical line, that means that I'm crossing the x-axis at 5. So my slope for x equals 5 is going to be undefined. How do I know it's undefined? Again, because it's going to be U stands for undefined. Now, if I'm thinking about my graph here, and it asks me for the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is where it would cross the y-axis. So if I actually graph this, and I look at the graph itself, and I go to positive 5, and I graph this line, so I have a vertical line at 5. If it is going to be a y-intercept, it would have to cross the y-axis right here, which it is not. So there is no y-intercept for x equals 5. Okay. So same situation here. I have x equals -2. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that. Or excuse me, y equals -2. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that. I have a horizontal line here. And the question is asking me for the slope. So my slope is going to be 0. How do I know it's 0? Because that's what the O stands for. So my slope is 0. And then my y-intercept. So where does this graph cross the y-axis? Well, it crosses the y-axis at -2. So if it's y equals, the y-intercept is the number itself. So my y-intercept is at -2.